You know that feeling when you look in the mirror and the person looking back feels like a stranger? Not in a dramatic horror movie way, but in a quiet, unsettling way. You go through the motions of your day. You laugh at the right times. You answer questions. You complete your tasks. And yet there is a persistent sense that the person doing all of this is not quite you. It's as if you are watching a documentary of your own life, narrated by a voice that sounds familiar but lacks any real conviction. You are present, but you are not here. You are functioning, but you are not living. And the worst part is that you can't pinpoint exactly when it started. There was no single event, no dramatic before and after. It was a slow fade, a gradual dimming of the lights, until one day you realized you're operating in the dark. You try to explain it to yourself. Maybe you're just tired. Maybe this is what being an adult feels like. Maybe you've finally outgrown the version of yourself you used to be. But deep down, a quieter voice keeps asking a question that makes your chest tighten. What if I never find my way back? You start to feel like a ghost haunting your own routine. You remember a time when things felt vivid, when your opinions were clear, when your desires were urgent, when your emotions had texture and weight. Now, everything feels flattened. You make decisions based on what you think you should do, not what you want to do. But you're not even sure what you want anymore. And that uncertainty begins to corrode everything. Your relationships start to feel like performances. Your career feels like a script you're reading from. Your own self-talk becomes a dull, repetitive loop of "it's fine" and "I'm okay." When you don't feel like yourself, the first instinct is to treat it as a problem to be solved. You try to go back to the old hobbies. You try to spend time with old friends. You try to remember who you were at 18 or 25, or before that job, or before that breakup. You think that if you can just reconstruct the past, you'll find the missing piece. But the harder you chase that old version of yourself, the more elusive it becomes. And what starts as a sense of disconnection slowly morphs into a quiet shame. Because if you're not being yourself, it must mean you're being fake. If you don't know what you want, it must mean you're lost. And if you're lost, it must be your fault. You must not be trying hard enough. You must not be paying enough attention. But here's the thing you need to understand. You are not broken. You have not lost yourself. What you are experiencing is not a flaw in your character. It is a natural, predictable adaptation of a brain that has been trying to protect you. To understand why, we have to look at what the self actually is. The brain does not have a single static you tucked away in a corner waiting to be discovered. The self is not a location, it is a construction. Neuroscience tells us that the sense of self is built moment by something called the default mode network, a collection of brain regions that become active when you are not focused on the outside world. This network is responsible for your internal narrative. It's the voice that tells the story of your life, that weaves your memories, your current experiences, and your imagined future into a coherent identity. When that network is functioning well, you feel like a unified, continuous person. You have a sense of agency. You feel real. But this network is also incredibly sensitive to certain conditions. It thrives on alignment, when your actions, your values, and your environment are in sync, and it becomes destabilized by chronic uncertainty, prolonged self-monitoring, and the suppression of your authentic emotional responses. Think of it like a radio signal. When everything is clear, you get a crisp broadcast. But when there's interference, when you're constantly asking yourself, am I doing this right? What do they think of me? Should I be feeling something else? That signal becomes scrambled. You start to hear static instead of music. That static is the feeling of not knowing who you are. The psychological mechanism at play here is called identity diffusion. It's a concept from personality theory that describes a state where the internal structure of the self becomes fragmented. This often happens when you've been operating in a state of high self-monitoring for too long. Self-monitoring is the act of carefully observing and controlling how you present yourself to the world. A little bit of it is normal. We all adjust our behavior in different social contexts. But when self-monitoring becomes chronic, when you are constantly scanning the environment to figure out how you should be rather than accessing how you are, the brain starts to deprioritize your internal cues.
Imagine you are a musician who has spent years playing in an orchestra where the conductor is constantly changing the tempo. At first, you strain to keep up. You watch the conductor, you watch the other musicians, you ignore your own sense of rhythm because you're trying so hard to align with an external beat. Eventually, your internal rhythm atrophies. You can no longer hear it. You become so reliant on external cues to tell you how to play that you forget you ever had your own rhythm. That is what happens in the brain. When you consistently override your own feelings, your own preferences, your own internal no and yes, the neural pathways that connect you to your authentic self begin to weaken. They don't disappear, they just become less trafficked. And in their place, a superhighway develops for the pathways of self-doubt, people-pleasing, and anxious prediction.
So how do you find your way back? Not by searching for an old version of yourself, but by rebuilding the connection to your internal world. This is not about finding yourself because you were never lost. It's about turning the volume back up on the signals you've been taught to ignore. The first step is to shift your attention from what you think you should do to what your body is telling you. This is grounded in the neuroscience of interoception, the brain's ability to sense the internal state of your body. When you suppress your emotions repeatedly, you literally dampen your brain's ability to read your own bodily signals. You stop feeling hunger until it's urgent. You stop noticing tension until it becomes pain. You stop recognizing anxiety until it becomes a panic attack. To reverse this, you need to practice small acts of internal listening. 3 times a day, pause for 90 seconds and simply ask yourself, what am I feeling right now, in my body? Not your thoughts about the feeling, but the physical sensation. Is there tightness in your chest, a hollow feeling in your stomach, a lightness in your shoulders? You don't need to analyze it or fix it, you just need to register it. This works because you are reactivating the insula, the part of the brain that maps your internal landscape. Every time you do this, you are strengthening the neural connection between your conscious mind and your authentic state. For example, imagine you're at work and someone asks you to take on an extra project. Your first instinct is to say yes out of obligation. But if you pause and scan your body, you might notice a subtle sinking sensation in your gut. That sinking sensation is information. It's a signal. It doesn't mean you have to say no, but it does mean you are now making the decision with more data. You are no longer acting on autopilot. The second step is to stop trying to be yourself and start making small, low-stakes choices based on preference rather than principle. When you've lost your sense of self, even small decisions feel monumental because you've attached so much weight to them. You think, if I choose the wrong thing, I'll be further from who I am. This creates a paralysis that keeps you stuck. The psychological principle here is called choice overload, but combined with identity threat, it becomes debilitating. Instead, you need to lower the stakes. For 1 week, commit to making every inconsequential decision based solely on what you prefer in the moment, not what is most efficient, not what someone else would want, not what makes the most logical sense. Which mug do you want to use? Which route do you want to walk? What do you actually want to eat for breakfast, not what is healthiest or fastest? This works because you are retraining your brain to associate decision-making with internal preference rather than external evaluation. You are reminding your prefrontal cortex that your desires are valid data points.
Let's say you're at a coffee shop. Instead of ordering your usual because it's safe and efficient, you look at the menu and ask yourself, what do I actually feel like tasting right now? If the answer is something you've never tried or something that seems indulgent, you get it. You are not trying to build a new identity. You are simply exercising the muscle of knowing what you want. The third step is to differentiate between the stories you tell about your feelings and the feelings themselves. One of the reasons we feel so disconnected is because we become trapped in narratives about who we should be, which then generates shame about who we are.
Cognitive science calls this evaluative cognition, the process of judging our own internal experiences. You feel anxious, and then you think, I shouldn't be anxious. I'm stronger than this. Now you are anxious and ashamed. You feel sad, and then you think, I don't have a reason to be sad. Others have it worse. Now you are sad and guilty. This secondary layer of judgment creates a fog that obscures the original feeling. To clear the fog, you must practice descriptive instead of evaluative self-talk. When you notice an emotion, describe it as a scientist would. Not, I'm so weak for feeling this, but I notice a wave of fear in my chest. Not, I'm such a mess, but I am experiencing a sense of overwhelm. This is a form of cognitive diffusion, a concept from behavioral psychology that helps you separate your sense of self from the content of your thoughts. You are not your anxiety. You are the one observing the anxiety. For example, you're lying in bed at night and the familiar spiral begins. I'm wasting my life. I don't know what I'm doing. I'll never figure it out. Instead of getting pulled into the spiral, you pause and say, I am having the thought that I'm wasting my life. That one small linguistic shift creates a gap. In that gap, you find a breath. In that breath, you find a sliver of yourself that was there all along, the part that was watching, not the part that was spiraling. The fourth step is to introduce what psychologists call identity-relevant action. This is the opposite of waiting to feel like yourself before you act. You cannot think your way back to yourself. The self is not a conclusion you arrive at through analysis. It is a pattern that emerges through action. But the actions have to be chosen carefully. They need to be actions that align with your core values, not your shoulds. A value is something you choose to care about, regardless of outcome. A should is a rule you've internalized from someone else. To do this, you identify 3 values that feel genuinely important to you. Not impressive, not marketable, but important. It could be creativity, or honesty, or connection, or curiosity. Then you commit to one small action each day that is a direct expression of that value.
If you value creativity, you spend 10 minutes writing in a notebook with no goal. If you value connection, you send a text that says exactly what you're thinking, not what sounds good. This works because it engages the prefrontal cortex in a process called value-based decision-making, which is one of the most reliable ways to stabilize your sense of identity. When you act in alignment with your values, your brain generates a sense of coherence. You feel solid, even if only for a moment. Over time, those moments accumulate. You begin to trust yourself again, not because you have figured everything out, but because you have proven to yourself that you will act in accordance with what matters to you. The final step is to embrace the concept of the observer self. In personality theory, there's a distinction between the experiencing self, the one that feels joy, pain, anxiety, and desire, and the observing self, the one that witnesses all of it. When you don't feel like yourself, it is often because you are so fused with the experiencing self that you can't see past its current state. You are in pain, so you believe you are pain. You are confused, so you believe you are confusion. But the observing self is always there, stable and unchanging. It is the part of you that noticed when things started to feel off. It is the part of you that is listening to these words right now. That part has never left. You cannot lose it because it is the one that notices the loss. The goal is not to become a different person. The goal is to expand your awareness so that you can hold your current experience, the confusion, the numbness, the disconnection, with more space around it. Think of it like this. You are not the weather. You are the sky. The storms come, the clouds roll in, the fog descends, and the sky holds it all. It is never damaged by the weather. It is never defined by it. When you feel like you've lost yourself, you have simply mistaken the clouds for the sky. You have become so focused on the turbulence that you forgot what was holding it. So when you wake up tomorrow and that familiar sense of unfamiliarity washes over you, Do not panic. Do not try to grab onto the old you. Do not try to fix the new you. Simply pause. Place your hand on your chest. Feel the breath moving in and out. And know that the one who feels lost is not the one who is lost. The one who feels lost is the one who is looking. And the fact that you are looking means you are already here. You are not gone. You are just listening to the static, waiting for the signal to clear. But the signal never stopped broadcasting. You just forgot to tune in. And now you remember.